So the protocol here is that the piece of ham is placed on a designated spot in the room. The owner forbids the dog to eat it, and they're not allowed to scold. So the owner leaves the room, and the experimenter either removes the food or leaves it for the dog. Then, when the owner returns, they're not allowed to have any overt verbal or physical interaction with the dog, and the dog is visualized for 10 seconds. Then the owner is asked, do you think your dog ate the food, or does your dog look guilty because the food is gone? Actually, that's what happens. The experimenter takes the food or the dog eats it. So the food is gone when the owner comes back in. Now we want to find out, do you think your dog looks guilty? That food's gone. They probably ate it, right? That's what the owner is meant to infer here. So essentially there are 4 groups in this study. There are the ate the food groups. So the food is replaced prior to the owner returning, even if the dog ate it, or the food is not replaced so that there's evidence of a misdeed. And then there is the other option of did not eat the food. So the food item is left present, or the food is removed prior to the owner returning so that the owner might suspect that the dog ate it. What they found was that this guilty look was not influenced by whether the dog actually ate the forbidden food or whether it had been removed by the experimenter. And so when we are looking at the evidence of the misdeed, the owner observing the food missing, the owners were no more likely than at chance levels to find out or to think that their dog was guilty and be correct. So it was just as likely that the owner was going to come in and say, my dog is guilty, he ate the food, than they were to say that he didn't have a guilty look. This means that the dogs are not showing this look that we interpret as guilty because they know they've done something wrong. Instead, they may be responding to the negative reactions of the owner or other cues that the owner might be giving off, even if they think they're not giving off cues that are negative. So the actual scolding event or anticipation of the threat or punisher could lead these guys to show these appeasing behaviors. And this is an important thing to keep in mind, not just because of what we discussed at the top of this discussion with the article, but because families that are punishing in the midst of the guilty look, they are not increasing the likelihood that that dog is going to be more comfortable with them over the long term. In fact, when dogs are getting punished randomly or for things that they cannot connect with behaviors that they can control, and even when the dogs are being punished what we would think of as appropriately, meaning that the punisher is happening every time, that it is within 1 to 2 seconds of the quote-unquote transgression, which, by the way, is usually a normal dog behavior, not an actual behavior that is species atypical for a dog, and that the punisher is at an appropriate level, meaning that it's not very scary to the dog, but it is uncomfortable enough that the dog doesn't want to do it again. Even when you follow all of these rules, punishers have a risk of increasing stress and anxiety and decreasing learning. So adding punishers in based on a guilty look appears to be completely irrational and is likely more a function of our frustration with these typically normal behaviors than it is a true attempt at teaching the animal anything. So what I encourage families to do when they come home or come into a room and see something that they are very unhappy about, that they are ascribing to the dog, which of course is probably the cat because you know how diabolical they are, but let's just say that you're blaming the dog, then the answer to that situation is walk out of the room and exhibit your frustration in some other way than yelling at your dog. That's not an appropriate target. Then come back, reassess the situation, and figure out how you can prevent it from happening in the future. And that's this week's VetVine evidence-based update.